Today, we're talking about the Leica Q3. Y'all, this camera, the Leica Q3. Let's see how this sounds. I'm gonna move it up. Oh, no, not. Oh, I already got that on camera. I've had this camera for about 2 weeks and I don't want to send it back. I am fighting every urge in my body to pack it up and send it back to lensrentals.com. Not a sponsor. I have had so much fun with this camera. I've shot my husband's first live show with it. I shot a concert, Billy Strings, I saw in Tulsa at the Bach Arena. Phenomenal concert. This camera did amazing. I've done self-portraits with it, and I've used it out and about when we were just out in Oklahoma and hanging out with our friends. It is such a good camera. I've wanted to point and shoot for a pretty long time now, and I had the opportunity to test out the Fuji X100V. There are a lot of things about that camera I just did not love. Fuji had a huge issue with the autofocus on the X100V, and because of that reason, I didn't want to pick the camera up and shoot it. They've since updated it, and the autofocus is much better than it used to be, but still I kind of have a bad taste in my mouth using the X100V. I didn't have that experience using the 6, the X106 that they just put out. The experience shooting with the Leica Q3 is unlike anything else I have experienced. I'm not sure exactly what I was expecting when I rented this camera. I really just wanted something to bring with me to Oklahoma for my husband's first live show. So I figured I would rent this Q3 and see what all of the hype was about. It did not disappoint. It's worth it. I'm just gonna tell you right now, it's worth it. I love this camera. I haven't shot with the Q2 and I haven't shot with the new Q3 with the 43mm lens, but this camera is phenomenal in every way. The autofocus is fantastic. The handling is fantastic. It feels good to shoot it. When you are hitting the shutter button and it takes that picture, you have a nice sound. Such a good sound. Not too loud that it feels like it's in the way when you're taking pictures, and it's not so quiet that you can't hear it when you're taking pictures. And that may not seem like something that's significant, but as a photographer, when you're in moments that require you to be quiet, and you have to turn the shutter sound off in order for you to be able to take pictures, having a shutter that is so quiet it's negligible is just one more way for you to be able to have easy access to taking pictures quickly. And I'm all about that. Find the easiest way for you to take pictures quickly with the least amount of barriers, and having a shutter that is quieter is just one more barrier removed. This camera comes with a 28mm at f1.2 and it goes all the way up to f16, which is fantastic. It does have a fixed lens, which I don't love, but in the instance when you are going to a concert, most venues will let you bring in point and shoot cameras if they have a fixed lens. I was able to bring this camera into the Billy Strings concert at the Bach Arena, and I did get in a little bit of a tussle with the security because they tried to argue with me and say that it was a professional camera because it had a zoom lens. And I'm not a confrontational person, but I did push back and let them know this is a fixed 28mm lens. I can't take it off and it doesn't zoom. I didn't tell her about the digital zoom. We don't need to talk about that. And she ended up letting me bring it in. I'm so glad that she did too, because some of the pictures that I got, I didn't take a ton, but some of the pictures that I got were really, really fun. And I'm so glad that I spoke up and that I said something about it, because this camera was perfect for that job. Because this camera does have a 60 megapixel resolution, you're able to crop the image down further and not lose as much resolution as you would with the Q2. It is an improvement from the Q2 having a 47.3 megapixel resolution, but I've not shot with a Q2, so we're not gonna really talk about that. The one thing I do wanna say in regards to that is when you're cropping the image manually, like in Lightroom, Photoshop, whatever your preference is, and you crop down to a 35mm frame, it's taking that resolution down to about 39 megapixels. And the camera has the ability to digitally zoom. I mentioned that a second ago. It's not zooming in and keeping that resolution. So if you use the frame lines that Leica has put in the camera, which is a super fun feature, I really love it, you hit this button, frame lines will come up, and it tells you in this bottom corner down here what the frame lines are representing. This is 35mm, this is 50, 75, and 90. So what's inside of those frame lines is essentially what it's saying it's going to take a picture of. But when you take that picture, it's not 60 megapixels within those frame lines. With the 90mm frame lines that you use, it's cropping the image down to 5.8 megapixels. And you can do that manually. You're still gonna get that same resolution if you manually crop it. So it's essentially eliminating one step for you in the editing process, which is nice, but personally I would rather just do that edit myself. While we're talking about that, the autofocus on this thing is nuts. Look at this. Like, even when let's switch back to our regular, even when I'm like moving, look at this tracking. It's so good. And it gets your eyes, like, it's so fast with the autofocus. Like, it's so good, you guys. It's so freaking good. I love the autofocus on this, which was a huge issue I had with the Fuji. Not having to worry about that when I'm taking pictures with this camera gave me no reservation in picking it up. It might seem like a small thing. Okay, the autofocus is not great, but I can still use it. For me, it's this added barrier that we were talking about that I don't want to have in front of me when I'm trying to take pictures. I want it to be as seamless as possible. And it's hard for me to feel like that's what's happening when the autofocus is not doing what it needs to do. So this Q3 having phenomenal autofocus, incredible resolution. For reference, my Sony a7R4, the resolution on this camera is 61 megapixels. So the Q3 has the same pretty much negligible resolution as my full frame Sony a7R4. It's comparable in size to, let's do it this way. It's about the same length and width as, it's a little bit wider than my Sony. It has image stabilization. You have the ability to shoot with autofocus like I've mentioned before, but you also can switch this little tab right here and it allows you to manually focus your images. So if you're in a situation where the lighting is kind of weird and the autofocus is having trouble, which for me, it didn't really happen, but if you're in that kind of environment and it's having trouble focusing, you can use the manual focus. Phenomenal, fantastic, I love it, it's so great. The other thing is the battery. The battery life is supposed to last, I believe, around 350 photos. And on the website or on the spec sheet, it says that it takes roughly an hour and a half to recharge the battery. And before I shot this video, the battery was completely dead and it took maybe a little over 45 minutes. It barely took an hour. So it charges a lot faster than it says it's going to charge, which is always nice. While we're talking about the battery life, I want to note that there is a feature that Leica has put in to release this battery. You flip up this little switch right here and it pops out, but it doesn't come out. Do you see that? And at first I didn't know why it wasn't coming out of the camera and I thought maybe I'd broken it, but they add this feature in here, which I really, really like. You have to slightly, can you see this? You have to slightly depress the battery for it to come out. So if you release your battery and for whatever reason on accident or whatever, it doesn't fall on the ground or it doesn't like sling out of the camera and you don't lose it or it doesn't run off on you essentially. You have to depress it for it to come out. Props to Leica for thinking of that because it's something small again, but it's like Leica is proving time and time again, to me at least, that they are all about the details and I'm here for it. The other thing we need to note is that this camera shoots in 4K, but it also shoots in 8K. To switch to video mode, there are two buttons up here on the top. This one is to switch between video and photo. This one is to switch your frame lines. We're going to switch to video and you can see in this top corner right here that it says 8K. So we're going to go ahead and shoot a little snippet of this in 8K so that you can see what it looks like for the Leica Q3 to shoot in 8K. How close can we get? Oh, pretty close. If you have the means to purchase this camera, my vote is 110% full send, yes, do it. It's gonna be worth it. If I had another point and shoot camera, I would sell it for this camera. Also, if it was in the budget, I would be purchasing this camera myself. It's fantastic. Now, I understand that this camera does come in at a whopping $6,200, brand spanking new, but you can find them for a few $100s cheaper on the used market. And quite frankly, it's something that's gonna last you a really long time, and they hold their value. So whoopsie, but seriously, it's worth it if it's something that's in the budget for you. Here are some of my favorite photos from the Leica Q3. That's it for today's video. If you liked it, please don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you have a Q3, please tell me your story about how you got it, how it's going, some of the favorite photos that you've captured with that camera down in the comments. I'm Tilly Scholl. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.